Good Wednesday morning, everybody. Hope you guys are doing well. And today is another pretty big day for the Seahawks in the sense of the roster is going to change. I understand that nothing earth shattering is going to take place today. I understand that this team is not going to be radically changed. But believe me, something is going to happen today that affects our season. It might not be immediately obvious. It might not be immediately massive. It may never be massive. You might not even remember it in a few months when it actually does make a difference. But something is going to happen today, or I guess tomorrow, that changes the destiny of this team in a positive or negative way. That's how I'll put it. Because yesterday was cut down day when all rosters had to get down to 53 players. But in the process of cut down day, you add 1,000 NFL capable players to the pool of players that can be picked up by other teams. So when you do that, inevitably some of the players that you release back into that pool are appealing to another team and they want that player. They might make another cut of their own team to bring in somebody that you let go. And the opposite is also true. Your team might be more interested in somebody that is now released into the waiver pool than somebody they had on their roster after cutdown day was over. So today is going to be the first day when things really go crazy with these waiver wire pickups. So sometime later today, possibly by the time you've watched this video, it's already happened. We're going to start hearing about players getting claimed off waivers or getting signed out of free agency because they got to skip waivers because their situation called for it, or players clearing waivers and thus therefore being able to go wherever they want, or clearing waivers and going to their original team's injured reserve. That's going to happen with quite a few players, including a few Seahawks. So the madness is not over, but the question that I think is on a lot of Seahawks fans' minds right now is who could the Seahawks go and get from the waiver pool that can make their team better? Yesterday, when I did the 53-man roster, I already talked about a few guys that could easily be let go to clear a little bit of space to bring in another player that maybe fits a bigger need. But who are the players who could be brought in that were released yesterday by one of the other 31 teams? So, first of all, just understand, this is over 1,000 players. I looked through the list here on this handy-dandy ESPN article that lists all of them, but I definitely missed a few. Understand that. There's too many players. A lot of them I don't know very much about. Some of them I don't know anything about, like I've literally never heard their name. These are the guys who, good chance, most of these guys never make an NFL team again. And a good chance that some of them do, but never actually play in an NFL game. Like, these are the guys that we typically don't hear that much about because they're not making Sports Center. They're not on teams that win Super Bowls. They're not making big plays in big games because they very rarely even stick on a team for more than a couple weeks at a time. So understand that there's a lot of stuff here that you can follow the NFL as closely as you want to and spend as much time on it as you want to, but you're probably still not going to know most of these guys. And also understand that because the Seahawks are a professional NFL team that has a big scouting department, they probably have some guys in this collection of 1,000 plus players that they like, who I've never heard of and you've never heard of and basically nobody's ever heard of because they scouted him at some point last year or the year before or maybe even last month, and they have some well of knowledge on him that they have because they're a scouting department that is paid to do nothing but find players like that. So I'm going to go through a list of players who caught my eye that were released yesterday or waived or cut or whatever nomenclature you want to use. But understand that there are going to be a lot of guys out there that the Seahawks probably are interested in biting on that none of us have ever heard of. And there's something that scouting department did last year or the year before that made them like this player that we just can't possibly know about because we're just guys. We're just guys. We're not getting paid millions of dollars to do this. We just watch because we love it. Okay, so in this video, I'm going to focus pretty much entirely on the defensive line because I know that's what you guys are thinking about, and that's probably what this team is thinking about. We have pretty serious need for depth on this defensive line, especially if Morris and Young are going to start the season hurt. So we need to add some guys, and I want to be clear here. I'm not looking for superstars or stars or even quality starters. I just want guys who can hold up and not embarrass themselves. They can play in a football game and not have it look embarrassing, basically. Just guys who can hold up. And these are not guys we're going to need long-term in all likelihood. We might only need them for a few games. So not looking for somebody who's going to wreck the world here. Just somebody who can hold up. Now, first, let me go over waiver wire order, because you're not just signing these players, you're claiming their contracts. And there is an order by which teams have to follow when they're trying to claim players. So the worst teams last year, so the worst team last year was the Bears, and then the Texans and the Cardinals, they start the order. If they put a waiver wire claim on a player, the player is theirs. And if they don't, then the next batch of teams gets a chance to claim that player. The Colts, the Broncos, the Rams, the Raiders, Falcons, etc. And basically, in order for the Seahawks to get a in order for the Seahawks to get a waiver wire claim in on any player, they need every team ahead of them in this list to not put in a claim on that player. And the Seahawks are all the way down here at 20. So there's a chance the Seahawks have a player that they want, but then a player higher on this list wants them more, and the other team would get them. But if the Seahawks want a player that somebody lower on this list also wants, then we would get them over that player. So with all that being said, let's take a look at some guys that were released yesterday, and I'll talk briefly about what jumps out to me. First guy is Quentin Bohanna. I remember this guy in the draft. He was a 6th-round pick. The thing that stands out about him is how big he is. And I remember Cowboys fans, when they drafted Bohanna, they were very excited about him. They thought he was going to be a great interior nose tackle. They thought he was going to be somebody who just stands in there and holds up against the run and takes on double teams, and nobody can move him because he's so big and strong. And it didn't really pan out. He didn't play terribly. He did actually get on the field a decent amount and do some stuff over the last couple years for a really good defense. And again, I want to stress this. If we pick up a guy like Bohanna, we're not going to need him the whole year in all likelihood. We're just waiting for Monet and Young and Foulu to get back. And Quentin Bohanna, and here's one of the keys here that we should keep an eye on. Players that have less than 4 years of accrued NFL time will not count fully against the cap. I got an email from a very helpful viewer who actually linked me to a page that explained this. Not going to say their name because they may not want that, but we'll call him Bob. So thank you to Bob. Basically, if you sign a player and they're on the roster for week 1 and they have 4 or more years of NFL experience, their contract becomes fully guaranteed for that year. If they have less than 4 years experience, however, does not apply. So a guy like Quentin Bohanna, who has only had 2 years, you could sign him, have him for the first few weeks, then cut him, and it wouldn't cost a ridiculous amount of money. So Quentin Bohanna kind of stood out to me, one of the first guys who got released, who, again, I know he's not good, but is he passable over the course of a few weeks for this team? We got Abdullah Anderson. He's been bouncing around the league quite a bit. Most recently, he was in the Commanders training camp. But last year, he played quite a good amount for the Falcons. He played 16 games, amassed 40 tackles, so has a good amount of experience. And I believe he's spent most of his career playing in 3-4 defenses. So Abdullah Anderson, definitely an appealing option as a defensive end type. Not quite 300 pounds, but very close. Like, if you had to put Abdullah Anderson on your team as like your 4th defensive end for the whole year, that would probably work. So that would be another guy. Next guy is a UDFA rookie who I did kind of sort of scout a little bit before the draft. It's Calvin Avery of Illinois. Teammate of Devin Witherspoon, by the way, but he's another nose tackle type, weighed in at about 335 pounds. Part of an elite Illinois defense that was number 1 in the nation last year. Just a typical run stuffer, nose tackle, space eater. Didn't stick in Minnesota, but maybe he's just what the doctor ordered for this team that just needs a little bit of a push in their depth. Marlon Davidson would be another guy I would look at. This is a former second round pick. I actually remember him getting picked. He was somebody that I was semi interested in that draft. Was a mid second round pick, and he spent 2 years in Atlanta and flunked out. He was in, I think, the Niners camp and didn't make the team. So yeah, he's a big disappointment so far for sure. But again, I want everybody to keep in mind here that beggars can't be choosers. We need depth for these first few games in all likelihood. So a guy like Marlon Davidson, you bring him in thinking, okay, at the very least he should be tolerable for a few games, but you also have that little seed in the back of your head that says, hey, this guy was a second round pick. This guy was great in college at Auburn. What if we can unlock it a little bit? What if we can unlock that potential that Atlanta and San Fran and I think a couple other teams couldn't? So Marlon Davidson, how about our old friend Carrie Heider Jr.? This guy is a veteran, so you would have to guarantee his salary for the whole year. But I like Carrie Heider. I thought he was pretty good his 1 year in Seattle. Not great, but given the situations we were putting him in, I thought he played fairly well. I think he would be good in a 3-4 defense. He's proven he can be a really good player. That 1 year in San Fran where Bosa got hurt, he had a really good season. You would have to pay him a little bit of money, but I wouldn't mind having Carrie Heider Jr. on my team for the whole season at a very low salary, which I'm sure that's what it would be. So, yeah, sign me up for that one. I got no issue there. Got Marquis Copeland, most recently of the Rams. He's actually played a decent amount for them last year. Now, not really a vote of confidence in his favor because of how bad the Rams were last year, but he can play. He's an NFL player, and that's all we're looking for here. Rashard Lawrence of another former division rival of the Cardinals, bounced around on that defensive line the last few years. Never really caught on. Tried a little nose tackle. Tried a little defensive tackle. Again, there's a little scrap of potential here that clearly didn't hit in Arizona, but he was a fourth round pick. So you bring in Rashard Lawrence. You expect him to give you something adequate, and you hope that maybe he can give you something more if you can unlock the lock here that Arizona just couldn't do. Another UDFA that didn't latch on, DJ Dale of Alabama. I scouted him out. I it wasn't in love, but for a UDFA pickup who's not going to cost you very much money because he has no NFL experience, not bad. Had a decent career at Alabama. Big, wide-bodied guy. Not really big enough to be a nose tackle. Kind of an awkward fit in a 3-4, but I kind of like DJ Dale when I scouted him out. And at this point, yeah, I'll take my shot on an Alabama defensive line player all day. DeSean Hand is another guy who caught my attention here, formerly of the Miami Dolphins, but the last time he really played was with teams like the Titans and the Lions. Now, he is several years removed from being a significant player of any kind. Like 2020 was the last year he actually played a lot. But I don't know, maybe he's been resting his body, right? He played in one game last year and barely played in it. The year before, he played in 4 games and barely did anything in those games, so maybe he was resting his body. I don't know. Guys, we're scraping the bottom of the barrel here. He's a former fourth round pick. He is a veteran at this point, so you would have to guarantee his salary, but again, we're just trying to find guys here, and why not? Speaking of veterans, we have Brett Urban. He was a guy who was released yesterday or waived. Former fourth round pick. He's been in the league quite some time. Ravens, Bears, Titans, Cowboys. And he's always been kind of sort of okay, decent. Not a big time player, but somebody who has consistently contributed for decent defenses, I would say. I think that's a fair way to put it for Brett Urban. And I think he would fit in pretty well in a 3-4 defense. We've got Tommy Tuglai, which, very fun name. I would definitely learn how to pronounce it if we signed him. Togiai. Togiai. Here we go. See? I knew PFR was good for more than just stats. Togiai. Kind of an appealing young guy who wouldn't cost you very much because he doesn't have 4 years of experience. Played a fairly decent amount for the Browns the last couple years. So, yeah, sign me up for a flyer on that. I'd take him over a random guy. You've got Tristan Hill. You might remember him from the Cowboys several years ago. He was the guy who gator rolled Chris Carson. Didn't really catch on in Dallas. This was a second round pick, by the way, so he's definitely a disappointment. But we have limited options here. So Maybe you bring him in just for a couple weeks and hope that he can fit in a 3-4, which I'm dubious of, but there is some talent here for sure. Next guy, another veteran. This is Mike Purcell, formerly of the Broncos, 330-pound, big-bodied guy, run stuffer. Pretty good one, by the way. He was a kind of a team captain for the Broncos these last several years, an important part of that defense. Formerly a Niner. Actually, very rare you see this. If you look at this, he took 2 years off and came back to Denver and has been pretty good. He's been pretty good, one-dimensional, but good. This is, by the way, the guy who screamed at Russell Wilson on the sideline in that Panthers game. So we could ask him what he was screaming about, I guess. If we brought him here, we could be like, hey, what was that all about? Because there's been some conflicting information about that. But no, I think this guy would fit in nicely as a nose tackle. You would have to have him for the whole year pretty much, but hey, how can this guy be really worse than Brian Monet? How is a guy who's been in the league this long worse than Brian Monet? I seriously doubt that's possible. Next guy is a guy that I really liked in the draft. It's Jared Clark. Nose tackle, nearly 350 pounds, played for Coastal Carolina. I really like this guy. He has penetration skills. He's strong. He holds up well against the run. The problem is he's very raw. And he did have success at Coastal Carolina, but that's a small school. If you bring him in now and you say, we need you to do something for us now, probably won't end that well because he needs time. This is a guy who needs to sit on a practice squad for a couple years, it seems. I really like him, though, so I would love to bring him in, but I understand we need guys who can help now, and Jared Clark might not be that guy. But I like him so much, if we brought him in, I'd be really, really happy about that. So that's it for the defensive linemen that stood out to me. Again, there are a bunch of guys that I didn't mention who would fit the bill, but I just wanted to go over the guys who jumped out to me as I was going through the cut list. Final guy I want to shout out in this video, though, not a defensive lineman. This one's an offensive lineman. Emil Ekor Jr. was let go by the Colts. He was a UDFA. I really liked him in the draft, and I was shocked when he fell. This is a guard with good movement skills. This guy can play in space. This guy can make blocks at the second and third level. I really, really was intrigued by him, and then I think he was hurt, and nobody wanted to take the shot on him, and now he's on the waiver wire. So you bring him in. I think that he could slot in very nicely as Damian Lewis's backup. So you'd have a backup left guard at this point, because right now we don't. And we're just going to roll with it, I guess, but we don't have a left guard right now behind Damian Lewis. It would be Phil Haynes bumping over or another guy bumping over. Okay, that's really all I got, guys. Let me know what you think. Did I miss anybody? Anybody else stand out to you? Any other positions you'd want to look at? Guys should be getting snatched up pretty soon here, so we'll keep an eye on it. Go Hawks.